Welcome to the channel. My name is Kubeir. I'm a CICC licensed immigration consultant. This channel is all about Canadian immigration news, updates, things you should do, things you should not. IRCC has been making these huge waves by conducting back-to-back express entry draws, something which we would love that it happens more often, but this has been a hot and a cold kind of series of draws. We will talk a lot about it as we go forward within our live stream today. But quickly getting on with this, today is Saturday, so we will do our Canadian Immigration Weekly Roundup, and we will take your questions and answers towards the end of this episode. So just hold on to that while we proceed forward. Okay, starting with the quote of the week: in the midst of challenges, hold on to hope like a beacon that guides you through the storm. Positivity will be your strength, illuminating a path towards brighter days. I don't think this quote needs any kind of explanation, least of all my commentary on top of it, because it's so self-explanatory. I know sometimes things just become too disappointing, too depressing, too low. Everything everywhere seems cloudy, dark. No, you cannot see a way through or whatever. But the only thing that you can do at that point of time, instead of feeling all dismissive, feeling all low, all down, and absolutely depressed, is just to hold on to that hope that you might have, that you will see the end of you will see light at the end of the tunnel. You will see the end of it, and if you just hold on to that hope like a beacon, then this will guide you through. This is how life is, right? It goes in cycle. You'll see the ups, you'll see the downs, and eventually you will see the light that you were looking for. That's all I can tell you. I mean, and this is in context with so many of you feeling quite depressed, quite you basically have lost hope in terms of what express entry is doing, what IRCC is doing, what Canadian immigration is doing. Just have a little bit of hope. At the end of the day, the idea is to understand what's happening. The idea is to then re-strategize. The idea is then to align yourself as to what the things are looking like, the numbers are looking like, and then set your expectations right. And hopefully then you can see that light at the end of the tunnel. Moving forward, this is the Canadian Immigration Weekly Roundup. Stay up to date on Canadian immigration news and trends, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. We are also now on Threads. That's the new platform that they have on Instagram. We will do the PNP updates. We'll talk about express entry and other news as that has happened. Ontario on the 6th of July invited, before I even go on to this one really foxed me completely. But let's talk about it. On the 6th of July, Ontario invited 748 PNP candidates, provincial nominee candidates, to apply for nomination through the express entry Human Capital Priorities stream. This was a draw targeting the tech occupations, and the candidates required a CRS score in the range between 479 and 485. As I said, because it was only 748 invitations, therefore the lower cutoff was 479. The higher cutoff is 485 because IRCS Ontario always plays it in tandem with the last all program express entry draw, and they sort of put it as 1 point less than the last draw, and therefore it is 485. Now, mind you, Ontario also has the highest allocation for nominations that they can invite per year. This time, for this year, it's 16,500. This was a tech draw, which basically means the 10 tech occupations that Ontario has identified, those were invited. Now, why did this fox me? Was because just the day before this draw, there was an express entry draw where they invited the STEM categories. There are 24 STEM categories, including these tech draws. It made absolutely no sense in Ontario to do this draw. Just absolutely did not make any sense. Now, I understand the draw for the express entry for the tech was also not a very good one. That was another disappointing draw that has happened, but we'll talk about that. But Ontario, I'm not sure what are they thinking. I'm not sure what they're trying to do. Maybe they know of something which we don't know. That's of course there. But I don't give it much credit that there is a very good communication between the province and the federal. That for sure has already been established in several draws earlier, that there seems to be no communication. I mean, Ontario should have been able to better understand and see what's coming. If nothing else, at least they knew that a STEM category draw is going to happen. This is a pure waste, in my opinion. But as I said, we will talk more about it. But this is the draw that happened. A very strange one, but Ontario conducted it anyways. British Columbia on the 5th of July also held 3 draws for 137 candidates in the skilled worker and international graduate streams, including express entry of the BC PNP. The largest draw invited 97 candidates with the minimum skills score of only 90. And the remaining 2 draws had 23 early childhood educators and 17 candidates in the healthcare occupation. Mind you, with British Columbia, you need a job offer unless you're applying under the international postgraduate stream. Alberta also conducted a draw, but nowadays they're conducting a draw, but obviously they're not publishing the draw until much later. So we never find out until our client or until somebody comes out in the groups and tell us that they've received an invitation. This was a small draw in which only 12 candidates were invited. This was a dedicated healthcare pathway draw with employer job offer from Alberta. The lowest scoring CRS score for this draw was 354, and Alberta also invited 105 candidates through the stream since April this year. So are you noticing a trend? Healthcare draws and tech draws. This is becoming quite common. Alberta is doing it. Alberta also has the accelerated tech pathway to attract tech talent. Then British Columbia is doing it. They're inviting healthcare occupations. They're conducting tech draw. Ontario is also doing the same thing, tech draw and healthcare occupations, priority occupations draw. And IRCC is also doing it, healthcare draws and STEM categories draw. Okay, I'm not sure what else is going to happen. What's going to happen to everybody else who is not from STEM and healthcare, because it seems like everybody is just concentrating on these 2 categories at this point of time. Manitoba on the 29th of June held a late draw in which 587 letters of advice to apply were issued to candidates in 3 streams over 4 draws. Skilled workers may have been eligible for one of the 2 draws. First one was an occupation specific draw, and which invited 315 candidates, and the minimum score was 613, which is, to be very honest, quite low. The occupations considered for this particular draw were the restaurant and food services manager, food services supervisor, food counter attendants. Another 184 letters of advice were issued to skilled workers from all occupations with a minimum score of 662. They obviously had to segregate the 2 draws because there are a lot of candidates within these 3 specific NOC codes. The restaurant, basically the food and hospitality industry by itself. The remaining 2 draws were invited 62 candidates from the international education stream and 26 skilled worker overseas with a minimum score of 717. So skilled worker overseas, lower number of invitations, but the score has also remained very, very high. Express entry. Now let's talk about express entry because this has been the biggest one this week. 4 draws back to back over 4 days, which was pretty interesting, right? I mean, we did not expect a draw on a Tuesday, but they conducted nevertheless. Independence Day in the US, 4th of July, they invited only 700 candidates in the all program express entry draw. I honestly did not understand this particular draw. Were they trying to make a figure of 5,000, like, because they invited 4,300 invitations, they issued 4,300 invitations the previous week in the express entry draw? Were they trying to make that a round figure and make it 7,000 or 5,000? Or were they just targeting the PNP applicants or the high scoring applicants and just clearing out the PNPs and just decided to make a round figure and issue out 700 invitations by itself? Did not understand this particular draw. It was an all program draw. The CRS score obviously was going to be very, very high because the number of profiles are quite high. Let me share this with you. There you go. This was the CRS score pool distribution in the express entry pool as of the July 4th. Between 601 to 1200, there were 353 candidates in the pool. Basically, these are the people who received their nomination. Then between 501 to 600, there were 726. So there were roughly about 1,100 some odd people in the express entry pool when the draw happened. Obviously, they issued only 700 invitations, which basically meant the score remained very, very high. The score for this particular draw was at 511, very high. As I said, I just did not understand this specific draw. Unless they were just trying to clear the PNP nominations or PNP applicants, I don't see what this particular draw was for. Of course, the previous week on the June 28th, they had already held the first ever express entry Canadian first ever express entry category based draw, category based draw, inviting 500 healthcare workers, and that the minimum score was 476. Because obviously the same day Sean Fraser had come out and made an announcement on a public through a media release that they would be inviting 500 candidates that day, and another 1500 the following week, the week of 5th of July. So therefore, on the 5th of July, which was the next day, we were anticipating a double draw between STEM category as well as the healthcare. But IRCC chose to draw out only STEM category workers. On the 5th of July, express entry score round number 2 happened for this week. So second draw. And this was only for 500 candidates, which did not make any sense. I mean, I could not understand this. Minimum CRS score was 486. That told you that from the last express entry draw which happened when the score was 486 to this week, the score was only 500 people with the STEM categories got added with a score of more than 486. So all of those were invited. Anything above 511 were already invited under the regular express entry draw. So between 486 to 511, there were 500 people who were in the STEM categories, and therefore those were the ones invited. I definitely anticipated and expected a larger draw size, because only 500 invitations after making so much of, Sean Fraser went to Collision, made this big announcement, 6 updates, 6 changes. We want to attract the talent, the tech talent to come to Canada, blah, 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 blah. And all we had was 500 invitations. So again, this one also did not make any sense, unless, of course, IRCC has another ace up their sleeve, which we will come to know as and when they reveal that. But this draw did not make sense. 500 invitations just did not crack it. Then what happened is the following day, 6th of July, I don't know, maybe they were spacing out the invitations. IRCC invited express entry candidates for a 3rd day in a row. And this time they invited the healthcare categories, which we were anticipating on the 5th. So they probably spaced it out to the next day. Invited 1,500 candidates. Minimum score for 4 of this draw was 463. Only healthcare categories were invited. There are about 34 or 35 categories in 35 NOC codes in this category. 463 seemed quite a high score, to be very honest. I was actually thinking it will be in the 440s or 450s, because I was comparing it with the Ontario's healthcare draw, which has happened earlier. But then in that draw, Ontario had invited about 2,700, 2,900 candidates. Here, between 500 and 1,500, they have invited a total of 2,000 people. Score dropped score dropped to 463. The good thing is that the score dropped. At least 460s. We are already there in 460s. A lot of people got a chance there. But that also could have possibly meant that a lot of people who were otherwise not very hopeful decided to make their express entry profile, who are from the healthcare occupation. So they also got an opportunity to do that. So congratulations, 463, great score. At least the scores are into 460s now, at least for some occupations, right? That's the way to look at it. Draw number 4. So the 4th draw, again, back to back every single day from the 4th of July, 4th July, 5th July, 6th July, 7th July, there was a draw? No, what happened to 7th July? Oh, this was not 8th July. This date is wrong, because 8th is today. So this was 7th July. Canada held an express entry draw for the 4th day in a row this week. And this was the French category based draw. So in order to be eligible for this French category, French proficiency category draw, you have to have at least CLB 7 in each of the 4 language factors: reading, excuse me, listening, reading, speaking, writing. So if you have at least CLB 7, then you were eligible in this draw. Plus, of course, you had to have a CRS score which would meet the range. And this particular one, they invited 2,300 candidates. Again, 2,300 more than the STEM, more than the healthcare, obviously. The score went right down to 439. Now, I've said this before. I mean, if you've been watching my videos, you've been watching this channel, if you've been with me, I have been blaring for almost 1 year now, ever since this motion M44 and the bill C19 last year, when we've been talking about it, came into play. I've been saying Francophones will have a big advantage in this. I mean, you can go back and watch all the previous videos. And I've been saying again and again and again, Francophones are going to have big advantage. Why? Because in the Canadian immigration mandate letter, and not only that, in the policies and agendas for Canadian immigration, there is this big push in encouraging Francophone immigration outside the Quebec area. So provinces are going to target it, express it, or the federal is going to target it, and they will do everything possible to sort of encourage Francophones to come and live in Canada outside the Quebec area. Because Quebec already is a Francophone-dominated province, so therefore they also want to sort of have the immigration of Francophones outside the Quebec area. Now, they also have a French mobility program, international mobility program for Francophones, whereby you don't even need an LMI. You can get a work permit if you have a job offer. And it's a very simple, straightforward work permit program. So that is also there to encourage people who want to come to Canada and work in Canada if you are a Francophone. So this one was a great draw, scores right down to 439, all categories. So Ontario also conducts a French speaker draw, right? But they choose categories. So they do not invite everybody who has a specific French score and they could come to Canada. No, they could come to Ontario or Ontario invite with. No, they will specifically choose specific categories within the French speaker stream that they have. Here, IRCC has invited everybody who was eligible, and score was right down to 439. 2,300 invitations were issued. But this also then tells you that we've been talking about earlier, who are these people who score such high scores of 500 plus, right? And one of them we've always been talking about are the Francophones, because if you have a CLB 9, for example, in English as a main language, and then you also have second language, French, and you score, say, let's say CLB 7, or you can reverse it. Let's say you have CLB 9 in French and you have CLB 7 in English, right? You can score almost up to 60, 62 points extra by acing both the language scores. So that was always the understanding. But the fact is that after issuing only 2,300 invitations, the score has gone down to 439, which basically means 439 and above, there were not a lot of people. 2,300 is not a very big number. But the good thing is that the scores are dropping, regardless of which stream, regardless of which category. This is a great opportunity, because otherwise, did you think 439 had any chance, had any opportunity? I mean, I certainly would have not thought so. Did you think that the previous score of 463 had an opportunity? We've been seeing the scores for the last whole year, right? Obviously not. It's only because of these category-based draws that you can now see that the scores are coming down. This was the 6th round of invitations issued in 2 weeks, bringing the total number of candidates that IRCC has invited within these 2 weeks to 9,800. Big number, okay? To be very honest, this completely puts my calculations, throws them out of the window. Speculations aside, predictions aside, all these things that we do as to thinking what could be the prospective score, what would IRCC invite, who will they invite, how many invitations, all of them obviously are aside because IRCC has their own plan. But as I said, I've been quite surprised as to what Ontario is up to, because they conducted a tech draw. Didn't make sense, right? Because STEM category candidates have been invited, score was 486. And then obviously there are only 500 invitations issued. And with all this big news that Sean Fraser went and made in collision saying, we're going to do this, we're going to invite people, we're going to do that, blah, blah. Only 500 invitations doesn't make sense, which basically tells me that definitely there should be some more invitations coming for STEM categories. It's just not possible that they won't get it, right? So, and if another draw for STEM categories is on the way, coming up sometime next few days, weeks, months, I don't know when, but whenever it comes, the scores are going to be lower. So everybody who received the Ontario notification of interest, that's down the drain. Not only that, everybody else who had received them earlier, they would also be thinking, should we proceed, should we not proceed? Well, for example, if you have an Ontario notification of interest, I would not recommend that you let it go at this point of time. I would say you prepare your application, you go ahead with the whole, because at the end of the day, it's the same set of documents. You need the proof of funds, you need the work experience documents, you need your passports, so that's the same set of documents you will provide to Ontario as well as to IRCC. So prepare your application, keep it all ready for Ontario. Don't click on the submit button because it'll cost you 1,500 Canadian dollars. You can afford to wait it out. You can afford to see what IRCC is doing in terms of the STEM occupation draws, because you just received the notification of interest. You have 45 days to submit your application. We probably will see maybe 2 to 3 round of more draws, I mean, you will have that much of time in hand to sort of give it a go. So at least wait it out for 35, 40 days. And then on the 41st, 42nd day, if there is no draw around the corner, by all means, go ahead and take your Ontario's application, submit the application. Because even after you submit the application, even after you've done it, until and unless they have started processing your application, you can still withdraw your Ontario application. So that money, 1,500, will be refunded to you if you get invited in the express entry pool. Now, just because you have received a notification of interest, whether it's from Ontario or from any other province, that does not mean you are no longer in the express entry pool. You will continue to be in the express entry pool. This is something which a lot of people get confused. Regardless of the fact that you have a notification of interest, regardless of the fact that you have applied to a province through the notification of interest, your express entry profile remains valid in the pool, and it's open to receiving an invitation directly from IRCC. If you get an invitation, you can then go back to the province and you can withdraw your application. If your application hasn't started processing yet, you will receive your refund of the application fee. If obviously they've started processing, then there will be no refund, but they can obviously let you withdraw your application. It's only after you accept the nomination in your express entry profile, right? So for example, once Ontario chooses to give you the nomination, you will get a message in your express entry profile. They said, have you received the nomination? Do you accept? If you will have 30 days to accept. Once you accept the nomination, at that point of time, you are no longer available in the express entry pool for a regular express entry draw, okay, or to any other province for that matter. And that's basically where your profile is a PNP profile, if you want to call it. But until such time, you can definitely withdraw your PNP application. You can go ahead with the invitation that you receive in your express entry from the IRCC, that you receive direct invitation, and you can absolutely do that. So there is no problem with that. You can always have options. You can always have a backup plan. So that's how you would go about doing this. But this is what has been happening. Other news. Now, H-1B workers, if you are, I'm not sure how many of you, right now there are about 176 of you watching this, but if you are an H-1B worker in the US, okay, now from what I understand in the recent report by Economic Times, I think, or Economic Today, it said that there are nearly 600,000 H-1B workers in the US. Of course, not everybody is from the tech background or IT background. There are other categories of occupations as well, but by and large, there are 600,000 H-1B workers. Canada is looking to invite 10,000 of that. I'm sure that you already know by now. It's big. It has been hot news. It has been big news. A lot of people are skeptical that because you're an H-1B worker, why would you want to come to Canada? But Canada is not targeting a high-paying, on-the-job H-1B worker who is in the US. They're not targeting them. They've already identified that if you are an H-1B worker, means you already have certain level of education. You already have certain level of work experience. Obviously, you have been vetted by the US to come to the US. So you already cleared certain qualifying stages. And Canada has no problem attracting those workers who are either laid off or are being laid off or are not happy where they are in the US, or they see that they do not have any prospects of doing something further, or they see no prospect for their green card, or they see no prospect for staying in the US for long term. Any of these, all they're looking for is 10,000. Okay, that's the cap. So 10,000 workers, this program is going to open on the 16th of July, which surprisingly is a Sunday. I'm not sure why they would keep a Sunday as the day to open for this, but you know what? There could be a strategy to it. Sunday being a day when most people are off, they have opened this date to accept H-1B worker work permit applications, which basically means you will be able to submit this application on the 16th of July. And depending on the fact that it's only 10,000 spots, it is expected that this would get filled up very, very quickly. Now, if you are an H-1B worker, the smart thing to do would be to understand what the requirement is. It's not a very, very complicated one. We, as immigration consultants, are already accepting applications from H-1B workers to sort of we can keep it ready, because it's only 10,000 spots. And 10,000 spots are going to get snapped. At least that's my opinion, because there are, as I said, 6 lakh workers, and out of 6 lakh, only 10,000 need to be coming. The total cap for this year is 10,000. So it's either 10,000 or this year, till the end of this year, whichever comes first. I absolutely feel it will be 10,000, which will come first. The people who are selected, who are approved, can also bring in their families on open work permit. So their spouse partners can come on open work permit. The children, if they are below the age of 22, can also join them. If they're below the school going age, they can study in schools for free. That's the benefit of doing it. Of course, there is no requirement for a job offer. This is an LMIA exempt, and you would be eligible to get a 3-year work permit. The good thing is the 3-year work permit, no job offer. The smart thing to do would be to make sure that your passports are valid for 3 years or more, because if they're not for 3 years or more, then you will get a shorter duration of your work permit validity. You can go on to the IRCC website. You can check what the work permit for people who are outside Canada or open work permit holders, what is the condition, what is the requirement. You can check what forms you need to fill out. All that information is available on the IRCC website, right? You can keep all those forms ready. You can keep the set of documents ready. Probably get a police clearance if you have to. In most cases, a medical is not required for people who are coming from the US. But if you have one, that's great. Have your education documents ready, because bachelor's degree is at least the least required document. Have your work experience documents ready. That is going to be a very, very big document. You will need to prove and establish that you have a background. Okay. And I have a feeling this is going to be only for the tech workers at this point of time. That is the indication, because the announcement was made in the collision conference. The whole heading of the whole announcement was to attract tech talent. So I am of the opinion at this point of time that this is probably to target the tech workers. It is definitely possible that they might attract all or any H-1B workers. It's a possibility, but we don't know at this point of time. We will only know on the 16th of July. But by that time, it will be too late. So if you are a person, regardless of who that occupation is, if you're interested in this H-1B program, if you're doing it, if you're choosing a consultant, hey, consider us. We're the smart ones, right? But if you're doing it yourself, obviously go to the IRCC website, check any work permit application process, download the forms, complete the forms, prepare the documentation. In documentation, the most important document obviously is going to be your H-1B visa. Okay, so have a complete scan of your passport. Hopefully your passport is valid for more than, at least more than 3 years. Police clearance is not required, but have it handy. At least from the FBI, PCC, you can get it over a couple of days. It's not a big deal. Keep your education documents handy, your passport scanned, your photograph scanned, and that's just about it. Keep the forms prepared. You would need probably 1294. You would need 5645. The family, did I say it right? 5645 for the family information and a travel information at most. That's pretty much it. And if you keep these documents ready, if you keep these forms ready, the minute the program opens, all you will need to do is quickly create your GCK account. You can actually keep a GCK account also ready. And the minute the program opens, all you need to do is fill up few steps, enter the information, upload the documents, pay the fee, $255 for the open work permit, $155 for the work permit, $100 for the open work permit. Click on submit. That will be as quickly as you will be able to complete it. And that is something which you can absolutely do. So this is for H-1B workers. It will start on the 16th of July. You're most welcome to contact us if you're looking to get some help on this application. We'll be happy to take it on. What else have we got? Now, IRCC is also planning another program for tech workers. Again, for tech workers. This was also announced during the collision. However, the details are not available at this point of time. This is under the International Mobility Program. They are looking to launch a new innovation stream by the end of 2023. Now, this innovation stream, nobody knows what it is about, but what the backgrounder says is that this means that IRCC will create a new exemption from labor market impact assessment. So basically, this will be because it's under the International Mobility Program, LMIAs are not needed under that, right? And this will be basically to support Canadian employers with the innovation priorities and high-tech industries. Two things could happen. The employer-specific, the closed work permits could go up to 5 years, or they could issue open work permits for 5 years. If this open work permits are started issued, I hope they will start taking care of those people who are inside Canada and working for tech workers, or tech companies are probably being laid off, or because, if the layoffs are happening in the US, layoffs are also happening in Canada. It's not that Canada is prone to, or sort of is shielded from such kind of economic recessions or economic waves. So therefore, I hope that these work permits are also made available to people in Canada, because at this point of time, if you hold a closed work permit, if you get laid off, you have no option. There is nothing much you can do, right? So I hope this is also going to take care of that. But this is something which we have to wait and watch. But this is another thing that is on the horizon and coming for tech workers. So plenty of opportunities for tech workers. If you're still here, Boop on the like button, like, share, subscribe, as they say. Of course, definitely subscribe. I want to see those numbers going up. We are there on all social media platforms: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and now also Threads. And that's where we usually are quite active, especially on Twitter for some reason. Okay, time for some questions and answers. Let's see what all we got. First, we're going to take a look at the super chats. Lovey Dovey says, CEC EAPR now classified as non-routine after 8 months. No PFL, pros and cons of withdrawing and submitting a new application. CEC EAPR now classified as non-routine. So you're referring to the fact that because it is now 8 months processing, therefore your application is non-routine. Well, even if your foreign work experience is under review. Now, even if you withdraw this application, and if you submit a new application, the chances are you will go through the same process and you will get stuck in the same area. If you know what is the issue with your foreign work experience, you may as well sort that out, use a web form and upload new documents to explain whatever the issue is for which your work experience is under review. Otherwise, if you will just withdraw your application, you will submit a new one, you will get stuck again with a similar review later on. And plus, you will lose this 8 months, you'll go back to the queue. This is the only con. The pro is that at least it's under 8 months. It's already finished the majority of the assessment process. If you give them the right documents so that they can complete the review and move forward, then you can get a decision. But the most important is to figure out what is it that is causing a problem with your foreign work experience. Hemlata, thank you for the super chat. I don't see a question there. Vishnu says, I received ITA in the recent HC, human healthcare worker draw. Yes, it's necessary to include the address in the passport to the address history. My working address is also different. Well, a lot of people get confused with the address in the passport. Does it have to match with your current passport, your current address? Do you have to be staying in that address? No. So first of all, your address in the passport is your address in the passport. Whether if you have lived in that address, then it will reflect in your address history. That's all you need to concentrate on. Concentrate on your address history. If you have lived in any of the addresses in the last 10 years, you have to mention those addresses, including your passport address. Currently, if you do not live at your passport address, it's not a problem. It doesn't make any issues. Just make sure you enter the address history correctly. Can the STEM score come down to 468? It can, but it all depends on how many invitations are issued. You have to also keep in mind that Ontario, when they have also conducted a tech draw, they have never gone below 470 for a very long time, which tells you that there are plenty of people in the 470 to 480 area. Will it come down to 468? Yes, it's possible. But in order to come down to 468, IRCC will have to issue a lot of invitations. When I'm saying a lot of invitations, I don't mean 5,000, 10,000 invitations, but much more than what they've been issuing. But that's what explicitly or exclusively will define whether the scores come down to that number or not. Do I need statements for salary information? My reference letter from India includes all the information. While you are required definitely to provide the reference letter, which includes all the information, there is a very high recommendation to add proof of remuneration. Pay slips, pay stubs, income tax returns, bank statements that show salary credit. These are very highly recommended. In most cases, if you don't provide it, IRCC will ask for it. In most cases. In some cases, they just might not, depending on which kind of a company it is or what kind of a corporation it is. But in most cases, they do. And if you want your application to be processed quickly, smoothly, fast, then do provide it. Raghu, thank you for the super chat. Unfortunately, don't see a question there. Raghu, still don't see a question there. Dhananjay says, experience completes in August in Tech NOC, but scores updated July. HCP NOI receives on July 6, but my experience will not be completed by deadline. How should I proceed? If you wish to proceed, if you're taking a chance with Ontario, then you should only submit after you have completed your work experience. That is the most important factor. If you haven't completed, then you should not submit that application. 488 in general category, but 1.5 years work permit left. Now, what to do? The only thing that you can do probably is improve your CRS score. And if your CRS is at 488, then didn't you get your invitation in the last draw at 486, which happened last week? So that is something which I'm not clear about as to why did you not get a invitation in the 486 draw, which happened last week. Number one. Number two, what can you do? You can only add more points. You can only improve your points. You can look for employers who can give you a job offer. You can look for PNP options. But apart from that, there is nothing much that can be done. As far as extensions are concerned, I don't anticipate anything happening anytime soon because the postgraduate work permit extension is for 2023. Whether they will give it for 2024 or not, you have to wait and watch. I doubt it very much. But then IRCC has done so many things differently, which I thought they wouldn't. So we'll have to wait and watch for that. But as far as you're concerned, improving your scores is the only option if the CRS score for general occupation draws or general category draws remain high. Right, let's see what other... please tell about labor category draw. There is no labor category draw, so I am not sure what you are referring to. No, IRCC has no labor category draw. So unless if you can rephrase your question, maybe I'll be able to help you with that. Okay, going to the first question. I think that you have been eligible. Okay, so I guess he's answering somebody else's question. For employer reference letter, date start part-time or date start full-time should be mentioned, or both? I'm not sure what you are asking me that question. In an employment reference letter, if you have had multiple work experience, if you had multiple job periods where you work part-time also and full-time also, where you also held different designations, then my recommendation is that have the employer, if it's a part-time, full-time, two different periods of work, then it's always a good idea for the employer to mention separately that this was a period of work you work part-time, this was a period of work you work full-time. For example, you were working as an international student, then you were working part-time. Now you're working for the same company full-time after you got your postgraduate work permit. If the employer mentions that separately, it will greatly help you in submitting your documentation, so there is no ambiguity there. So it's always a good idea to have that clarity in your documentation. I don't understand, for Francophone category, are they only judging people on the basis of TEF Canada score, or they are also adding IELTS point to it as well? Well, the requirement is that you should have at least CLB7 in all 4 factors in TEF. Plus, obviously, your IELTS scores are also adding CRS scoring points to it. And that is what is giving your score, that's what is bringing your CRS scores up, and that's how you're getting invited. I have applied for Ontario Employer Job Offer International Graduate Stream. My score is 79. Any chances? I do not know about chances. That is something which you will have to check historically and see what kind of scores they've been inviting in the past. If I get LMIA while I have PGWP, what will happen to my PGWP? It's a good question. It confuses so many people. I've had so many consultations asking me for the same thing. Having an LMIA does not change your status in Canada. LMIA is just a pre-authorization or a prerequisite for you to get or apply for a closed work permit. Just because you have an LMIA does not mean your status has changed, does not mean that your work permit has changed from open to closed automatically. No. In order for your work permit to change or your status to change, you have to first apply for a closed work permit. Until and unless you apply for a closed work permit, your open work permit that you have because of postgraduate work permit will remain open and it will be valid. So as long as you have a valid work permit, you can work for any employer. Even if you have an LMIA, it's not a problem. Having an LMIA, having a job offer will give you 50 points in your Express Entry profile and Express Entry application. That does not mean you now only can work for that employer just because you have an LMIA. Please understand, these are two different things. LMIA does not mean closed work permit. Closed work permit you get only because of LMIA, but just because you have an LMIA plus you have a postgraduate work permit means though you have an LMIA and you can get a closed work permit, but you haven't taken one, you have an open work permit, so you can work for any employer. But because of the LMIA, you can get 50 points. I hope that clarifies because it confuses a lot of people. What's the processing time for federal skilled worker applications? At this point of time, the standard processing times are 6 months. Average is between 4 to 5 months. When can we expect the next draw? I don't know. IRCC is the boss. They will do it whenever they think. There is no way to speculate or predict or sort of have any kind of understanding of when they will conduct that draw. Do you think there will be further all program draws? I have 507, but I'm not in STEM. I absolutely believe that there will be all program draws. I have a feeling that at this point of time, they will clear out at least one round of draws for all categories. They've already done it for 3 categories. While the STEM category had the raw end of the bargain, I think they will conduct another STEM category draw. It's quite possible that after 2 weeks, we might see another round of 4 draws. One day they will do STEM remaining, and then the other 3 days they will do the other 3 category draws. And then again, after 2 weeks, they will come back to doing a proper, regular express entry draw. Again, this is just a speculation. I don't know what the format is. I do not know when they will conduct what draw, but they definitely, in my opinion, will conduct a regular express entry draw as well. There is definitely an understanding of a specific quota for each category. I know for healthcare, Sean Fraser already came out and said in a media release that they're looking to bring in about 21,000 healthcare workers over the next 5 years, which basically gives me an understanding that about 4,500 to 5,000 people, healthcare occupations probably are going to get invited. If they've already invited 2,000, that means that remaining about 2,000, 2,500. That's the understanding I get from what I've read and I've heard. I'm assuming they have a similar number in mind for each of these categories, that we are going to get, like, say, 25,000 people under STEM, you're going to get 25,000 people under Francophone categories, you're going to get 10,000 under the trades, you're going to get 20,000. I'm just saying that these are probably the numbers that they have over a span of 5 years, because these programs, these pathways have to have a longer timeline. They cannot just be for 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 draw, 2 draw kind of a thing. These are also then open to the changes based on the labor market conditions as we go year on year, right? For example, this year the demand is for IT and healthcare. Next year or a year later, it could be for something completely different. It could be for professional occupations or for management occupations or for financial occupations, depending on how the market is reacting to different things. But we're going to have to wait and watch for that, because there is no pre-information that we have on these aspects. Okay, Hemlan says, if I decide not to include my spouse in my application to increase CRS from 474 to 477, will my children be eligible to obtain PR? Yes, there is no problem. This is again another common question. People ask, can I submit my application with my spouse as unaccompanying, but can I include my children in my application? Absolutely, yes, you can. There is no problem. It will not impact your application. You can submit your application and show that your spouse is not accompanying you. You will give a brief reason why your spouse is not accompanying you, but you will absolutely include your children, accompanying you, especially if you're the mother. And that has absolutely no bearing. That is not a problem. That is not an issue. You can submit your application. There's no problem with that. Kshitij says, I was employed in NOC-B job. I was laid off in the 11th month of employment. I'm not able to find a similar job. Need your guidance and options for me, available for me, doctor. First of all, I cannot give you too many options right now on this call. If you're in the 11th month, unfortunately, you will need your complete 1 year of work experience. If you do not have your complete 1 year of work experience, you will not be eligible in most of the immigration programs. I do not know what your other aspects of your profile is, what education is there, what IELTS scores are there, what language skill scores are there, where you have completed your education, what kind of work experience do you have? Do you have any foreign work experience? You see, there are so many variables to understanding what the chances would be. But the best thing to do is would be to check the provincial nominee program websites to see where you are eligible, to see what kind of options are available. But having at least 1 year of work experience is the first step. So while you are not able to find a similar job, if you are in Canada, having a same job, similar job is not important. You could have multiple NOC codes. You could have multiple employers. You could be from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 to tier 0. Any tier doesn't matter. As long as it's valid, you're getting paid. First priority is to complete your 1 year of work experience. That's the most important priority. Then you figure out what are the occupations. If you're targeting skilled trade, then you have to have 1 year of experience in the skilled trade in Ontario. Okay, that's the condition, that's the requirement. So you have to identify what are the backgrounds there, what are the variables there, and then accordingly you can review and make your decision. Can you apply for a student visa in Canada if you are an asylum applicant in the US? Technically, yes, you can make an application, but if you are an asylum claimant in the US, then the chances for you to get an approval for a student visa are quite low. And the reason for this is that if you are an asylum claimant in the US, then that does not make you for a very credible person who will come to Canada and then leave Canada at the end of your valid period of stay. But technically, to answer your question, that can you apply for it? You can absolutely apply for it. Can I add a spouse after receiving PNP 600 points? Well, technically you can, but it all depends on what the conditions of your nomination are. Is your spouse included, not included? Who is the province? What was the provincial conditions? What are the provincial requirements? Does the province allow you to do that or not? Atulya, I'm sorry, I see a super chat. Thank you so much, but there is no question there. Naya says, gave reference letter for study permit, which comes under NOC 4. Can I update the same letter from the company with NOC 1 responsibility when applying PR? Well, you want to change from NOC 4 to NOC 1, from completely ineligible NOC code to completely eligible NOC code. Well, it's a risk that you are taking, because you have first informed IRCC that this is the job description you have. Now you'll be changing it entirely from this to completely something on the total extreme of it and saying this is my job description. To be very honest, that would be considered as misrepresentation, because you are now providing a completely contrasting information than what you have already provided. Risk is absolutely yours to take. Do we need to show proof of funds for CEC if we get ITA in a healthcare category-based draw? Good question. Category-based draw is just a category in express entry. First, you have to be eligible in a program. There are only 3 programs in express entry: Canadian Experience Class, Federal Skilled Worker, Federal Skilled Trade category. These are the only 3. PNP is not a category. Category-based draws is not a category. Canadian Experience Class, Federal Skilled Worker, Federal Skilled Trade category. You have to be eligible in one of these 3 categories in order to be able to apply. Therefore, if you are a Canadian Experience Class, no matter what is the category based on, no matter what is the PNP that you got a nomination in, you will still be eligible under the CEC for the express entry. Therefore, there is no requirement for proof of funds in CEC, and hence you can simply upload a document that states, hey, I am a CEC and therefore I am exempt from proof of funds. Will they continue general draw at all? Well, in my opinion, yes, they would continue a general draw for sure. We don't have international travel histories or stamps in our expired passport. So please guide, do we have to submit old passport too after receiving ITA? Again, a very, very common question. As far as IRCC is concerned, the requirement is very clear. You have to upload the current valid passport only. And all pages of the current valid passport which has any kind of stamps or markings. If your passport has no valid stamps or markings, there are nothing there, it's a clean new valid passport, then simply upload the bio pages. There is no requirement to upload old passport or old passport stamps. Nothing to do at all. Okay. Regardless of the fact that you have a PCC with the new passport or for the old passport, your IELTS are with the old passport, your VES is with the old passport, even then there is no requirement for you to upload your old passport. Only if IRCC needs to see your old passport, they will ask for it. Otherwise, there is no such requirement. Okay. Questions flowing through. We can't get an option to specify exact dates in express entry profile. Then they only give us to enter month date, a month year. Due to this, I get 2 years experience, but in actuality, it is 1 year, 11 months, 23 days. So I'm not sure what your question is. Again, and I've said this so many times before, if you get invited before you have completed your legal period of work, that's not a problem. You can continue with your ITA, submit your application only and only after completing your valid period of work for which you're claiming points. I am going to apply STS study visa on coming Monday. Is this timeline 60 days enough? Which basically means you are targeting the September intake. Well, technically it's enough, but to be very honest, realistically, you're already quite late. For a September intake, anything after 30th of June has a very high risk of not being processed in time. But recently we have handled so many applications for study visas, they are coming through pretty quick. So I think you may just be fine, but it's always a very, very thin line that you are walking on. Okay, I have got ITA in healthcare worker draw. I have 3 years experience, but for first 4 months, I don't have documents. I have self-declaration affidavit and legal affidavit from a colleague that will work, or shall I decline? Salary was in cash. Salary was in cash and you have a self-declaration affidavit, that will not work. I know there are a lot of agents out there who say that if you do not have work experience document, provide a self-declared affidavit. No, please don't do that. Self-declared affidavit is a recipe for disaster for your application. IRCC does not accept self-declared affidavits. Okay, sometimes they don't even accept affidavits given to you by your peers, by your colleagues. The requirement is that you have to get a employment letter, employment documents from your employer. That's the first or the main option, right? You get it from your employer on the letterhead, proper document. If you cannot get it from your employer on the proper letterhead, then you need to have some communication with the employer whereby they have refused to give it to you, or you've really tried the best and you can't get it. Then you can approach your manager or your supervisor who you were reporting to, who can then give it to you in writing, and then you can take that as an affidavit and then provide every other document that validates the period of work, that says that yes, you are working, employment letter, experience letter, pay slips, pay stubs, anything that shows that you are working. The credibility of the claim that you are making is extremely important, but self-attested affidavits, definitely a no-no. Okay, what else have we got here? I have my profile in CEC. Recently, I received a notification on 6th of July. Do I need to show any proof of funds for Ontario application? Yes, for Ontario application, you have to show proof of funds. If you are working, you currently are working, you have a job offer from your employer, you can show that. Ontario's website gives you a good description or good explanation of what they will accept as proof of funds, or alternative to that as a working job offer in Ontario. Follow the website and you will have proper information. But even if you are CEC, but if you do not have proper job offer to show, then you still need to show proof of funds for Ontario application. Sophia, I don't see any question there. Tanu says, I'm currently out of status due to GTS work permit extension refusal. Will I be able to apply work authorization after applying restoration of work permit? Came on 1 year GTS work permit. If you have gone out of status on a closed work permit, you can apply for restoration, apply for the extension, but there will be no authorization to work until your status is restored, and you are given a new work permit. There is no interim authorization, and you cannot work until you get a new work permit extension. I have submitted my individual OINP application. My score is 478. Adding my spouse will reduce my score to 469. Should I wait for a STEM draw? If you've already submitted an Ontario application, why would you wait for a STEM draw? Just continue with your Ontario application. 469, we do not know when that gets invited under STEM. I'm a very strong believer. A bird in hand is so much better than two in the bush, which you don't even know whether you'll get or not. Claimed points for LMIA in EAPR. Work permit expires soon. Would CRS on EAPR change if I apply for bridge open work permit? No new job offer. No, your CRS score will not change. You can apply for a bridge open work permit. You claimed the points for LMIA job offer. That's absolutely fine. At this point of time, I would not recommend changing. I would not recommend changing jobs, at least until you get approved. Okay. Need to keep French primary for French category based draws? I think yes. Have 6 months experience in 2-1, 2-3, 3 years and 1 year continuous experience in the last 10 years. Am I eligible for STEM? If your primary NOC code is 2-1, 2-3, then yes, you would be eligible in STEM. If you can claim that and you have 6 months experience within the last 3 years, then you would be able to show that experience, your primary NOC code, provided you also have 1 year experience in that at some point of time within the last 10 years. And if that is your primary NOC code, then yes, you will be eligible in 2-1, 2-3. Can we expect banking related NOC code for Ontario or SINP in coming months? I don't know. There is no way to estimate, or there is no way to guesstimate or predict which NOC codes Ontario or Saskatchewan will unite anytime now or later. Can I make changes in my permanent residency profile after getting ITA because I showed a relationship as uncle, but he doesn't have his birth certificate? Can I fill no now in relative point? Yes, absolutely. If you do not need those 5 eligibility points in your express entry, only then you should say no to the uncle aspect of the relatives if you do not have documentation to show relative presence in Canada. That's all right. Even if you have a relative, you do not want to show that relative, that's absolutely fine. You will only say yes to that if you wish to claim the 5 eligibility points. Will STREM draw see any better ITAs? I do not know what you mean by that question when you say see any better ITAs. So unfortunately, I don't know what to answer to that. FSW outlined all steps completed on the tracker, but no COPR. Well, it just means you should have patience and wait. The good things take time, and it will come around. It should be around the corner. Can I get invite at 462 in agriculture category? I don't know, because there is no way to know how many people are there in the express entry pool in the agriculture category and how many invitations they will issue. I'm assuming that it's a good score and hopefully you will get it, but there is no way to predict or estimate any scores at this point of time. Is there any difference between sponsorship draw and draw invitations? I don't understand that question. I'm not sure what exactly you refer to that. I spent 4 months in India working from home and was getting paid during this period. Will this duration be considered under CEC experience? Absolutely not. In order to be considered as Canadian work experience, you should be working in Canada. You have to be in Canada. That is the condition and the requirement. My score is 483. I am sorry, but okay, guys, there are so many questions asking for chances for this score, this category, that category, this NOC code. I don't know. I really don't know. I wish I knew. I could make so much money out of that, right? But I don't know. And anything that I will say is absolutely a pure speculative guess, which has absolutely, I don't know, what are the chances of it being true? You can all check yourself, right? Do we know how many invitations will be issued? Do we know which NOC codes will be invited? Do we know how many people are there in the express entry pool within that category? If we don't know, there is absolutely no way to make that kind of a guess. And therefore, I would avoid answering those questions because I really don't know. I mean, how many times can I say I don't know, right? It doesn't make me look very good. I recently got a PR for a family of 4. Can I travel with my spouse alone and later go back to bring my kids before their COPR expires? Hope it won't be a problem with immigration. Absolutely. There is no problem. You can travel with your spouse as long as everybody travels within the validity period. You're absolutely fine. They can travel later. The primary applicant must travel first, or you can accompany the primary applicant. I'm working as a postdoctoral fellow at McMaster. I'm confused what it means by having a job offer. Does it mean having an LMIA? I have a job offer for my current job. Yes, it means either having a job offer. First of all, there are two things. You could be an LMIA. So first one is that if you have a job offer, it is accompanied with an LMIA. You have an LMIA, you have a job offer, then it is 50 points. If it is not tier 0, 1, 2, 3, if it is tier 00, then 200 points. So that is the first one. This is I think everybody knows this. You have an LMIA, you have a job offer, you get points. The second one is you could be on an LMIA exempt job offer. That is where postgraduate work permit get very, very confused, because there is also LMIA exempt job offer. But the condition is that you are on an LMIA exempt closed work permit. You should have a closed work permit, LMIA exempt, and your employer, whoever you're working with, you should have completed 1 year of work experience, and that employer is willing to give you a job offer after completing 1 year, saying that this job offer is valid for 1 year. Then in that condition, you can claim points for that job offer. I hope that clarifies. Okay, last few questions before I'm ready to scoot off. I got ITA and CEC. I'm married, but I have applied express entry as married, spouse not accompanying. Can I add her? You can add her, absolutely. If your new score after adding your spouse does not reduce your score below the cutoff score, then you can absolutely add your spouse. No problem with that. My medicals are about to expire on August, but I have received my visa. So in order to enter Canada, should I take a new medical exam or can I go with my old visa medicals? I do not know what visa are you on, so there is no way for me to answer that question. If you have a visa as an international student, you already entered Canada before, you've just gone for a leave and you're coming back, your medicals don't matter. If you're a worker who came to Canada, you have a work permit, you went for a holiday, you're coming back, if your medicals are expired, it doesn't matter. But if you're a new international student who hasn't yet come to Canada and your medicals have expired, then you really need to do your new medicals. Make sure the new medicals have been updated by IRCC, and then you should travel. Okay, the questions continue. And I know that there are a lot of questions that I have not been able to answer. Please, by all means, do come back. Comment below under the video after the video gets over, and I will come back and I will answer most of the questions as I can. And just clear off these last few super chats, I guess. Okay, I want I want a family PR, but my individual profile is 478, which I got Ontario application. So can I add my spouse? What can be done? I'm sorry, but I don't really understand your question. If you have submitted your Ontario application, after submitting an application, once you get the nomination, you can check with Ontario if they will accept to add your spouse or not. If they do, then you can add your spouse to your application. That's what you can do. Paturi Prasad says, do we need to submit the proof or documents for experience mentioned in personal history? Good question. Any information that you enter in your personal history, employment, education, anything, you do not need to provide any documentation for it. So any period of work for which you don't want to claim points, you can move it to the personal history. And in the personal history, you can mention it, absolutely mention it, because you need to mention everything, any activity within the last 10 years. And for any activity that you show in personal history, you do not need to provide any documents. So there is no problem with that. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining in. I really appreciate it. I know you have taken your time off on Saturday to watch this and hopefully educate yourself. Hopefully I was able to answer some of your questions. If I did not, then please do comment in the video comments below so I can see those questions, and then I will respond back after some time. Thank you so much. Take care, and I shall see you next time.